when I first got to North Carolina, right before we're getting ready to move into the dorms, my mom is with me, and we went to a Cracker Barrel for breakfast. And when we are walking into the Cracker Barrel, so mind you, I go from Colorado, 0 humidity, to North Carolina in August. So it is humid, it is very hot. I'm like, I can smell the water in the air. Why is it so wet? So I was wearing a pair of shorts and a tank top. And, whatever. I was always a curvy girl, which, we can get into the whole racial politics of that as well. And the ways that I feel like I realize now that like my body was policed because it wasn't a thin body. And how that's both gendered and racialized. But, so we're walking into the restaurant and there was an older white man sitting outside and he goes, "Oh, look at this little nigger slut." And my mother doesn't say anything to him. She didn't say a word. So we walk in, we're seated. We're sitting, I'm literally, supposed to be buttering my biscuit. And she goes on like a whole thing about how I need to think about first impressions and basically made me feel like shit and told me I had to go and put on a pair of pants. Because basically I was like exposing myself. And I think in her mind, she's like, you're about to live in North Carolina. North Carolina has racist people. The Klan is here. She in her mind, I think she saw it as, I'm going to protect you. So you need to, cover yourself up and not make yourself a target, et cetera, et cetera. At no point did she say, "I'm sorry that man said that." Or like, I don't know, like even, it was not a helpful interaction, right? And this is pretty much, like I'm getting ready to move into a dorm and then like, my mom's going to be gone in a couple of days and I'm going to be on this side of the country all by myself. So that it's not that I hadn't experienced racism before. But I feel like that was like a really like light bulb moment, right? Where it's like, not only I think does she kind of dismiss a lot of like kind of things that I've dealt with, right? Which I don't think is ever productive. And I think sometimes like, we dismiss things that even like younger children experience because it's like, oh, well, you're a child, you couldn't possibly experience racism or sexism or any of these other kinds of things, right? But even as I've like gotten older, where I'm like, I literally studied it, so I know that this is discrimination, and you're still telling me that I'm overthinking it, or I'm overreacting, or I'm being too sociological, and I'm just trying to, make everything into a thing. At the same time that she's, well, I don't know what white privilege is because, in her mind, she's a woman. She doesn't have a college education or a college degree, right? She doesn't, my mom has dealt with, disability for most of my life because of a car accident she had when I was a kid. So it's like, well, I can say all these ways that I'm not privileged. And I'm just like, so like trying to, it's, there's always those tensions. And again, I'm not saying, that my dad is perfect, but like, at least like when I go and I tell him about something racist I experience, he's not going to tell me I'm making it up. Mm-hmm. His immediate response is to, kind of like, how can I support you, or like talk about it, or to share an experience that he's had that's similar. And so I think, again, these things look different, I think, when we're not talking about, multiracials who have a white parent, when we're talking about so-called multiple minority multiracials. Obviously these things can look different, but that doesn't mean that anti-Blackness, especially if the person, right, whether the person is mixed with Black or not, right, that doesn't mean that anti-Blackness isn't happening. But I think particularly with white parents, and, I've had these conversations with others about how, parents have this, quote, natural inclination, to claim ownership of their child, right? And so they want to see that they are being claimed the way that they are claiming, right, their child. But I think we also have to think about kind of the colonial logics of the nuclear family and how that informs even this idea of claiming children like a piece, like property that you have ownership of, and like, because I am your mother, you will respect me, you will claim me, you will allow me to claim you, you will allow me to tell you, right, about how you identify and how you move through the world, even if that isn't what you actually experience, right? And I think we also have to think about kind of the role of white parents, historically, at least in a lot of like kind of some aspects of the multiracial movement. So, you know, we have evidence that a lot, like not all, I don't want to say all, right? There were a lot of multiracial people who pushed for the mark all that apply change to the census. But there were also a lot of white parents who were like, y'all not gonna ignore my kid's whiteness. I want to check that box too. So, you know, they definitely, right, were signing up, right, to support that movement. So it's this interesting thing to me that most people who meet me don't even assume I have a white parent. Even if they assume that I'm multiracial, most people don't assume I'm mixed with white. And so, so it's funny to me that like, that's my lived experience, right? But then my mom, right, and a lot of other white people, right, you know, are very adamant that like, no, this, like, you need to be claiming me in a particular way. And if you don't do that, then you're rejecting me, right? And, you know, there's a whole genre, you know, like of books, you know, these memoirs of white mothers of, you know, non-white children, whether they adopted them or they're, you know, they're multiracial children, you know, and them coming to the realization that their kid doesn't move through the world the way that they thought that they did. You know, and so I think probably the most famous one is Jane Lazar's memoir. I forget the title right now, but like there's this disturbing scene where she talks about her son, her multiracial Black son, going to the hospital and then like strapping him down to the gurney because of the assumption that like he's going to be, you know, aggressive. And like that was the turning point for her, realizing like, oh no, the world sees my son as like this aggressive Black man. You know, or even, you know, what happened a couple years ago now with Tony Robinson in, I think it was Milwaukee or somewhere, maybe Minnesota, Wisconsin, one of those. Young multiracial Black man with a white mom who was shot by police, you know, and like, you know, the response from the family, you know, was very much like, you know, he's a mixture of everything, even at the same time as they talk about him being a Black man, right? And it's like, okay, you know, like you had the white mom and the white grandma come cry on TV because they've lost their child, their grandchild. And I'm like, yeah, and the police still didn't, you know, indict that officer. But they said the officer was doing his job, right, that he was, you know, within like normal operating procedures, right? You know, and kind of how those kinds of moments, right, you know, and it's always, to me, it sucks that it's like these moments of violence that serve as like these reminders of like, no, like this isn't how you thought it was. You know, and I think that that's, you know, very much, especially I think, you know, I think for a lot of reasons, my dad being dark-skinned, my dad being a large Black man, my dad being from Flint, like he was, I think, never gonna, you know, like kind of fall in line with the idea that like race didn't have the significance that it did, and that we were gonna have to downplay our Blackness, I guess I should say, in any way, right? He was, you know, his response was always, no, they're gonna be treated like Black people, so we need to prepare them for that, right? And so, you know, it's, I think that there's some other difficult things to navigate, perhaps, when multiracial people, you know, phenotypically, you know, don't show up as people who are read as unambiguously Black. And I think that that's part of this, that's been part of this like really interesting conversation that's been going on, again, in academic Twitter in response to this woman, Jessica Krug, who's well, she's not teaching her classes, and I think they're trying to push her to resign. So she may be a formerly associate professor of history, I believe, of African history. But, you know, she's a white woman, white Jewish woman from an affluent neighborhood in Kansas City, I believe. Kansas City, Kansas. And she has been masquerading as more recently as a Afro-Latina and Afro-Puerto Rican in particular. And so, there's been some responses that are like, oh, well, this is why we need to police Blackness. And, some people have like been like automatically in there, like policing Blackness. They're like, kick the mixed people out, which I'm just like, and so, but there are right conversations that need to be had about colorism. Right. And what does it mean to be part of be in community and be part of the community, right, of Black people? So be in community with and be part of the community. When we have to think about how some Black people, right, because of colorism, and discrimination against hair and all those other kinds of things, right, are so unambiguously Black, right, that there's no questioning, right, kind of where they fit within our racial logic in the US. And then, right, the kinds of treatment that they're going to receive because of that. I mean, I would be very interested, at least in like, at least for me, I guess, like academia, because that is the field within which I work. But I mean, we probably could look at a lot of other industries as well. How many of the Black people that are within positions in academia, how many of them are light-skinned? How many of them are multiracial? I would be very interested to see that, because I definitely, kind of even think about it, here at FSU. So, there've been, like kind of some of these presser things that go out, where they're like, highlighting, talk to these faculty about XYZ because of their expertise. And there've been a couple of times where I was the only Black faculty member included. And it is very bizarre to look at like a spread of photos and see that I am the darkest skinned person that they've included. And I mean, I'm a Fenty 340, so I'm not, I'm not, like, I am light skinned. That is not up for debate. But there are definitely people who are lighter than me. And so it's like, but yeah, it's very weird. I'm like, I should not be the darkest skinned person in this array of photos. Like, that is disturbing, right? But like that's right, kind of some of the reality. And so I'm like, what does it mean? Like, not only for me as a light skinned person, right, to be the Black person that gets included, but also as me as a multiracial person to be the Black person that gets included. And there's definitely lots, to kind of talk about in terms of how, we should be careful about, multiracial identity and how it, strengthens these kind of eugenicist race science ideas that, you could actually be half anything, right? Because like race is not biological. Physical features that we associate with racial groups, yes, are biological, but, that doesn't mean that race is biological. And so this whole idea, when my mom talks about white blood, I act like I don't have white blood. I'm like, there's no such thing as white blood, but okay. Or even like that essay, earlier this year, earlier in pandemic season, that was talking about having rape colored skin and having rebel gray blue blood running or coursing her veins. Like, just because there are people, right, who were Confederates or who, were blatant, unapologetic white supremacists, may have assaulted, some of your ancestors way back, like that doesn't, like, they're, like, Confederate blood isn't running your veins, like, and, like, I understand, like, and the woman, that professor is a poet. So like, I understand that she's like, taking particular poetic license, right? But I'm like, this is like, you're like in reifying, right, and strengthening again, like this biological idea of race. I don't think that does a lot to help us in trying to like kind of have better thinking about this. And so to bring this back, I think about like multiracial people and multiracial families. Again, I think a lot of people subscribe to this idea, right, of race as kind of biological. And so, you tie that up with family ties as biological. And yeah, people are like, no, you have to claim, whiteness and blackness equally because you have one parent who's this and one parent who's this. And if you reject, right, your whiteness, then right, you're rejecting the white parent, right? And like, it doesn't really even allow room for, right, rejecting whiteness perhaps, right, as a political idea or as a social position, right? And that's, I think, the thing that I struggle with a lot with my family. But I also, recognize that like not every mixed race person has the racial politics that I have. So, I can't like provide blanket advice. I mean, ideally, right, I would like us all to be a lot more radical in how we think about race and how we even think about families. I mean, there's a lot, some interesting, thinking about, about abolishing the family, right, as a structure. So again, not saying that we don't need community, that we don't need support, that we don't need people to care for us, right, and that who we care for, but more abolishing, right, the idea of compulsory and biological family as a concept, because many of us, whether it's an interracial family or not, right, can be born into families, right, that harm us. And because of these ideas around, well, they're your biological family, so you have to be family with them, kind of obligates people to maintain relationships with people who do them harm.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I think, we have to think about those things.
Yeah.
And again, not just, when we're talking about interracial couples or multiracial people. I mean, this is an issue for queer folks as well.
Yeah.
And any other, right, kind of number of issues. I mean, I just think about, the way that people talk about, these people who are the anti-vaxxers and how, they don't want to, vaccinate because it'll give their kids autism, and like how that would make a child feel. If, the child has any kind of learning disadvantage or learning disability. Or just anybody, right? I think, people who are living with disabilities and, how our culture kind of is extremely ableist, right? So, I mean, I think these things can be extrapolated to other axes of oppression, but yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly a thing that I think have struggled with as I've gotten older, is, I feel a certain way, I think, about wanting to maintain relationships with my family because they're my family, right? But also like how that family relationship can be used to take advantage of people. And it doesn't feel great to, right, kind of be told by my family kind of constantly that there's some kind of like delusion I'm living under, or that like I'm some bad person, or like the moment when my mom, told me that I was becoming an angry Black woman, and like her really not thinking about what that meant.
Yeah.
And like how that would be harmful. And so I think a lot of people, just because you're in an interracial relationship doesn't actually mean that you're thinking thoughtfully about how race and racism work. And I think even if you're not in an interracial relationship, people need to be thinking about those things, but especially if you are, because to me, like, it's not love isn't just going to magically conquer all kind of a thing, right? Like, and also, kind of, who we love and how we love them, that's shaped by all of these other factors in our society, in terms of, who we're told to value and how we are told to value them. So it's one of those things that obviously hits very personally for me as a multiracial person, which is why I was interested in studying multiracial people, because like, that's an experience that I come from. But it's also like, for me, like, I have this kind of particular politics around race now, that I've developed through doing this work, and, learning more and reading more and engaging with other people, that certainly informs why I still do this work. And yeah, so it's definitely interesting, especially, in kind of trying to not just talk with my family or talk with other people, but, like teaching students, because we have a lot of students who are multiracial and multi-ethnic, especially, since we have so many students here at FSU, who come from South Florida.
Yep.
And we're also, kind of having to navigate additional aspects of, kind of, kind of different prongs, I think, of Blackness. I think because, we have so many students who are Caribbean, and kind of how that informs also, right, kind of their navigating of Blackness in the U.S. So layers.
I
don't know if any of what I just said, really came from
very, very good.
Matter of fact, it sets me up perfectly for this question as we kind of round things off.
Yeah.
I mean, you were given so much information and so much knowledge that I'm completely blind to. So for someone who is open to this conversation, or someone that wants to learn more, where do they start? Because we do not have all of the knowledge and research that.
Yeah. No. Well. I guess it depends, right? So, I mean, I think that if we're talking about interracial couples, so one of my favorite books to kind of engage with, well, I can list a couple, I guess. So one that's really great, that's primarily about Black-white couples, but the author, Amy Steinbugler, talks to heterosexual couples that are Black-white partnered, and then also queer couples that are Black-white coupled. And so the whole book is about what she calls race work. So basically all of the different kinds of labor, basically, that goes into kind of making these relationships function. And so she kind of talks about things like certain kinds of fatigue around that, particularly the partners of color feel, when, kind of having to go out and be in the world, and maybe having a greater kind of attuned, kind of sense of when something might be discriminatory or what have you, right? When we talk about white privilege, part of that privilege, right, is a certain obliviousness, right, to how they are moving, to how white people are moving through the world as racialized beings as well, right? When a white supremacist structure, right, frames it as white people as the default, right? White people are default humans, and everybody else is a hyphened human. Then, right, when you talk about race as an issue, right, it almost is, right, always, well, those people who are considered having race are people who aren't white, right? And white people don't have a race. It's no, white people have a race. White people are moving through the world in a racialized way. And their race, right, is impacting how people interact with them and how they interact with others. And how people are perceiving them as attractive or friendly or approachable or any of those other kinds of things, right? And so she talks about kind of this race work that these couples are doing as they try to figure out places to live, how they kind of just manage if they do experience any kind of discrimination, all that kind of stuff. So that's a really great book. The book's called Beyond Loving, and I forget the subtitle, but it has race work or something in the title, and it's Amy Steinbugler. And then there's another great book. It's called A White Side of Black Britain. And so that's a book by France Windance Twine. And so she went to the UK, and she was interviewing and kind of just sitting around in the houses of these interracial families that had primarily white mothers, who were raising, multiracial Black children. And so the book focuses on a small segment. So she does note in like the intro that like the majority of people that she talked to are not what she calls racially literate. She focused on the like less than 25% of her sample that had racial literacy. And so she does this great like work of like kind of unpacking like what does it mean to be racially literate, and how does one do that as a parent trying to, you know, kind of raise a child that is going to be perceived as and treated as Black. And there's definitely like a gendered component too. So like she has like most of the book is about mothers, but she has like one chapter about like white fathers, and like the white fathers are not doing the same kinds of work that the white mothers are doing. And it was really interesting about how like these white mothers were like really dependent on like Black women friends or Black women like families in law, you know, to help them learn that racial literacy. And so, I mean, I think there's a couple of different people who kind of try to get into this idea of like, what does it mean to be racially literate? Or like even racism literate. You know, and there's, you know, all of those reading, you know, those anti-racist reading lists that are going around, you know, we're like, here, what well-meaning white people learn about racism. I will not recommend the How to Be an Anti-Racist book. There's I think been enough public critique about why that book is not good. But there are others to choose from. But you know, I mean, I think part of this, right, is it's not just about recognizing that racism, you know, what, like even understanding what racism is, recognizing that it exists, recognizing that it is going to impact even your precious multiracial children. Oh gosh. It's also right about I think being thoughtful about you know, kind of the information, you know, that children are exposed to. So I mean, you know, there's, you know, all of this stuff, you know, that kind of talks about, you know, like making sure, you know, that kids, you know, have dolls, you know, so like Meghan Markle talks about, you know, her family putting together different doll sets so that she could have a white dad doll and a Black mom doll, and then there was, you know, the little brown baby doll, you know, so like here's your family represented in your toys, right? This is normal. You know, and I certainly, my family, you know, definitely bought me Black dolls when they could get them. You know, and I don't know if like, I don't know how, to what degree perhaps I registered that was like, you know, important when I was little. But, you know, I mean, I think that these things add up over time. Like, I think there's a reason, you know, I felt the comfort that I did as, you know, a middle schooler and a teenager in participating and being a part of, right, these, you know, Black culturally oriented things. And I never felt like I didn't belong in those spaces. And, you know, even when I got to college, I never felt that I didn't belong in Black spaces. The only ways I didn't feel like I belonged were because I was poorer than everyone else. And I didn't, you know, have like Lacoste shirts or whatever, you know, it is, or Longchamp bag. You know, so because of it wasn't based on Blackness that I didn't feel like I didn't belong. It was definitely a classed thing. And I remember I used to joke all the time about how I was glad that I at least had like Black culture, Black US cultural knowledge, you know, so like my dad taught us all how to play spades and my mom plays spades, and, you know, so like grew up playing spades. You know, certain, you know, like my dad, big, you know, I mean, obviously being from Flint, you know, so grew up, you know, big in like, you know, Motown music, that kind of thing. But like my dad, you know, likes a variety of music. But, you know, I feel like kind of what's considered like very kind of like culturally US Black music, like I definitely grew up with that music. You know, so there were ways that I still felt that, you know, I had an understanding of you and US Blackness, that I felt like I could be in community with other Black people, even if they were more affluent than I was. You know, so it's you definitely, I think, have to kind of, you know, do that work to make sure that, you know, children are exposed to those communities, and to spaces where that identity is affirmed. You know, and this is why, like, so Jennifer Bratter is a researcher who does a lot of work on kind of mixed race families and where they decide to live. You know, so a lot of multiracial families, right, the ideal neighborhoods for them are, you know, racially mixed neighborhoods, but, you know, most of our neighborhoods, you know, are extremely segregated. You know, and so you do get a lot, especially I think as people move up, you know, economically, they're going to be more likely to probably live in a segregated neighborhood. Or at least if it's racially integrated, it's probably not going to have a lot of Black people, because there's been also some other research, I forget her name, but, you know, Asian and Latinx folks also don't want Black people living in their neighborhoods, right? You know, nobody wants Black people there because, you know, the property values will go down. You know, so, you know, if you can't live in a mixed neighborhood, then like, do you send the kid to a mixed school? What kinds of, you know, after school programming do you do? What kinds of books and toys and other media is in your home? Do you have Black friends? You know, right? You know, all of those things. Like, there's a lot of ways, I think, to kind of try to reaffirm identities. And I mean, it's one of those things is I don't know if like, I really don't know if my mom necessarily had to work very much to like reaffirm my whiteness, right? Like, it's just kind of there. Like, you know, this white woman is raising me. We go visit my white grandmother, you know, my white, you know, aunt and uncle sometimes come through with my white cousins, you know, like I'm like, you know, like these are white people. I mean, I don't know. I don't, whereas I, you know, I remember my mom like learned how to give, you know, like learned how to use motions at home. So like we were, you know, giving my sisters have a more textured curl pattern than I do. So they got relaxers when we were younger. You know, my mom learned how to do them at home. You know, my sisters had the crochet braids. Like, there's certain kinds of like protective styles that they had that I never did. I mean, I did cornrows and all kinds of braiding and all that kind of stuff. But like my sisters did like crochet braids and had relaxers and other kinds of things that like were not part of my hair care practice. But those are things that my mom like had to learn, especially after the divorce, because my dad actually did all of our hair before my parents broke up. And my teachers, like when I got old, like when I would get to like high school and stuff, and I would like go back to visit like my elementary school age teachers, they like joked about how you could like tell when my parents broke up, because I went from being like this super well-groomed child to like hot mess. You know, went from like, you know, the curls were pristine, moussed, you know, there were bows in the hair. And then like, you know, 5th grade, I was doing my hair. So it was either frizzy, like triangle of hair or frizzy ponytail. And that was it.
I'm learning.
No, you know, and so like, I mean, a lot of people like to make jokes about, you know, like how you can spot mixed race kids with white moms because like their hair looks a mess. It's either that, right, or they like, you know, have like a single dad, right? This idea that like, you know, the kids look a mess because someone is, you know, but no, my dad was meticulous about our hair. So like, you know, we were always extremely well coiffed. My dad used to like chase us around with like a squirt bottle, or he to like keep the curls like wet, or he literally would put a wet wash rag in a Ziploc bag with some water and would like bust that out to like wet the hair down if it was like getting too frizzy. Like literally that went like in the bag. I love how Daryl's like, so it's just like,
I have 5 sisters. So, you know, I've seen it all.
Yeah. Well, you know, and so I think as I got, you know, especially when I got into like middle school, so one of my best friends since 4th grade, so she's a cosmetologist now as an adult, but like, you know, when we were growing up, she braided all of our hair, like, you know, she did all of our hair. And, you know, so, you know, my Black girlfriends are where I learned a lot of like my hair practices, you know, not from my mom. So, you know, like getting my hair, you know, hot comb straight the first time and all those other kinds of things. Like my friends did those things for me. Anytime I had a weave or whatever, like my friends did those things. Which it's hilarious to think about like me putting weave in my hair because I have a lot of hair. But, you know, I would have these really ridiculous, especially for like, you know, like dances and things like that, you know, so, you know, well, good times.
Yes. No, this has been amazing. And just your sharing of so many of your lived experiences on top of the amazing research that you do and that you've shared, I think has been really enlightening. I've learned a lot.
I was just listening.
I know. I'm like,
I was like, where do I
take
sign
it
up
all
for this
in.
class?
Yeah.
Like, where do I sign up for this class?
I actually really, really want to teach like a multiracial, like America, or like a mixed race studies class.
Oh my gosh.
But I've been told I'm not allowed to do any more new course prep until after tenure.
Okay.
Oh.
Because since I've been here, I've taught 5 different classes. And so that is a lot of prep for a junior person. And like, I keep coming up with ideas. Like what I want to do is come up with a women of color feminisms class. And I've been talking about it for like a couple like years now. And like, I really want to make that happen, but I'm supposed to, I should probably listen to my chair and try to,
How far away from tenure are you?
I am supposed to go, I'm original date of going up is fall semester of 2022. So 2 years basically. So basically, 2 years from now, because I would have to have my dossier submitted by September. I haven't decided if I'm going to, so they have offered tenure track faculty here at FSU an extra year for the pandemic. I haven't decided if I'm going to take that yet, since I'm on fellowship right now. I'm supposed to be, publishing and sending things out. And so I'm gonna basically kind of just try to get stuff done this year. And at the end of this year, basically kind of evaluate, well, how many more publications do I think I need? And do I think I can feasibly manage in like one more year on the tenure track? Or would I need to take that extra year? So I probably need between 5 and 7 more publications. Are my estimate. Thankfully, it's really just the publication count is really kind of the only area for concern. I am very involved in service activities at both the university and Saba, don't bark. at the various national levels, and teaching seems to be going well here.
Where can people find you?
Where can people find me?
Yes, where can they find you?
Okay, well, so I'm on Twitter a lot, as April has already noted. So you can definitely find me on Twitter. I'm trying to, I write occasionally for public outlets like Bitch and some other places.
What was that?
Bitch Magazine has also an online platform. So I've written, the piece about Meghan Markle that you mentioned was there. I wrote a review of the series Mixed-ish there as well. And I'm behind on writing something for them right now. About Kamala, so we'll see if I actually get that done. I'm trying to like blog now. I don't know. I think I'm trying to like introduce a more daily writing practice for myself, because I'm a big time procrastinator when it comes to writing. I'm definitely like a binge, like sit down for hours and like bang something out person. And all of the like professional development I've received suggests that is not a sustainable way, though. I don't know. I'm definitely not the only binge writer out there. There's a lot of other folks I know who have tenure, who are full, who like they're total binge writers. So, it'd be nice to have a more daily practice, but I don't know. We'll see.
Well,
so I'm trying to get into blogging.
When we publish this episode, we're going to make sure that we drop some of your article links that we've talked about into show notes. We also send out an email. So if you are in our audience and you're listening, we do have an email that goes out every week. It's our weekly highlights. And if you didn't get this week's email because you're not a subscriber, you should subscribe, because we are going to feature some of Dr. Buggs's previous articles that she's written that are really good, and her Twitter handle, so you can click on and follow her on Twitter. And so you should definitely subscribe. And I am just loving that you came on and did this interview with us. This is so good. This is gold, and it's really relevant right now. It's going to continue to be relevant. It's definitely relevant for us, and I learned so much.
I was like,
yes, really good.
Oh, I was gonna add. I mean, so if there are people who don't have like institutional access that want to read like the journal articles, you can always email me, and I'm happy to send you the PDFs.
Perfect.
Okay. Oh, that's
that
awesome.
Is awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, we will. We definitely will probably be reaching out for some of that.
Yeah. People probably want to read the autobiography, the Dayglow White Mama article.
I can't wait to read that one. It's about me.
Yeah, some of my friends assign it in class, and the students always have interesting responses.
I can't wait. Well, we are going to make sure that all the information is out there, and we just want to say a really big thank you from us and from our audience. And I think for now, that's all we've got.
That's it. Until the next time.
Bye.
Peace.